This video, we're going to try to solve why your plants are yellowing. We'll get lots and lots of questions on the channel over the years about why my plants have yellow leaves, or it could be red leaves, it could be other types of foliage related issues, but it's really hard to diagnose those things. If I just get a question, that's 2 sentences of, why is my such and such looking such and such way, I have no idea without seeing it. So what we're going to do is try to go through a list here of reasons that your plants might have off-colored leaves, and then we're going to go through a quick kind of checklist of trying to figure out, asking yourself some questions, and then figuring out from that list which one of those problems is yours. Hopefully this makes sense at the end. One of the ways you'll get some yellow leaves on something is this is an evergreen dogwood, and when it blooms in the spring, and it's actually already budded up right now, for its spring flowers, and it's August right now. It's going to carry these flower buds through the whole winter. Doesn't bloom until April or May of next year. And about the time it's going to do that, it's going to actually shed some leaves. So despite this thing being evergreen, it's going to have some yellow leaves on it in the early to mid-spring. It's just completely normal behavior. You'll see that on azalea, so evergreen azalea. So despite the fact they're evergreen, doesn't mean that they don't lose leaves during at some point during the season. So sometimes coming out of winter, as they're budding up and the buds are swelling and they're about to flower, you'll see some interior yellowing on them. And that's the time of year they shed a few leaves right before they put on full flower and new foliage. Okay, so that's kind of how that happens. Another scenario that's kind of similar to that is some trees race out in the spring as fast as they possibly can, because the goal at the end of the day for some trees is get into the light. And so something like a river birch you may have experience with, where it'll come out in the spring and it just grows like mad. It grows as fast as it possibly can. And the moment it meets resistance in the summertime, it will shed some portion of those leaves. So you almost get 2 leaf drops a year on something, river birches. Red maples will do that. We have a red maple over here next to us. There's the occasional leaf drop, midsummer leaf drop on that. It's kind of a normal behavior for some plants. And it's just like, I'm going to see how much I can grow in a season. And the minute that any resistance happens, I know to shed half these leaves really quickly, or some portion of these leaves really quickly, to kind of readjust. So again, you'll get some just kind of normal yellowing on things that are evergreen or, deciduous plants, mid-season sometimes, just in a rebalancing of themselves, because it's a lot to ask. I got to come into full flower, and I got to put on new growth, and I've got to maintain all these old leaves. And the plants, a lot of these plants will just typically decide to lose a few of them at that time. So when I get the yellow leaf question, and obviously I don't have photos of it or anything like that, I first asking myself, well, is it in the new growth or is it in the old growth? And this is an important differentiation here. We're going to talk more about all the things that would cause it up in the new growth, and most of the rest of what we're going to talk about here. But when it's happening in the oldest growth on the plant, a lot of times that's underwatering, or the plant being asked to do too many things, like I just said with an evergreen azalea, trying to do so many things at one time in the spring. But if all of a sudden it shows up in midsummer and you start shedding a bunch of leaves down toward the bottom of the plant or the interior of the plant, and you start to get some thinning down there, a lot of times that can be associated with you put it in the ground and maybe damage the roots, when you were in the process of planting it, because of course you're damaging the roots some when you're in the process of planting it. And it's just not able to get enough water up in there. So the plant has to say, well, I can't maintain this much foliage, with the amount of roots that I have left and the amount of water that's available. And that may be related to how hot it is outside as well, as to how that thing can bounce. So what the plant does is just rebalances itself and says, well, I'm going to get rid of 1/3 of these leaves, or 20% of these leaves, or whatever. And you'll see that interior thinning on things. Usually that's a pretty good indication that at some point that plant was dry. I'm always careful to say this to folks, that be careful at that point, because I think if you see that and you go, oh, it got dry, then your immediate response is to go start watering it, and then you end up overwatering it. Keep in mind, the plant kind of put itself back into balance a little bit already, and make sure you're actually checking before you water. Don't respond to that situation by overwatering, because again, it's kind of back in balance. When I plant something new in the late spring or summer, if I was planting the sky pencil holly at that time, I probably would have held all this together like this and given it a haircut, okay? That probably would have helped the fact that I was damaging those roots a bit in the first place and may have prevented some of that thinning that's inevitable if it's gonna be trying to grow at the same time you're trying to transplant it. There's a few more things that could be the issue with your off-coloring leaves on your plants before we get to the general yellowing and the new growth that we're going to talk about in a minute, which could be several different things. But one of those three things before we get to that group could be insect damage. So this verbena, we don't get a lot of insect problems in this garden, but this verbena, you can see how we have that strong mid-vein color in that leaf, but we have this splotchiness in here. If this was just generally yellow between these mid veins, I would think that it's related to some things I'm going to show you on the general yellowing part in just a few minutes. But because of that splotchiness that's in there, in between these mid veins, you can see that kind of almost dusted white color that's showing up in there. I know this is spider mites, which are just little teeny tiny mites on the back of this leaf that are sucking the juice basically out of this leaf. Plant's under stress in some way, and they've gone to town on this. We don't get a lot of insect problems out here in this garden, but these spider mites are definitely an issue, and it's off-colored that plant. So if you see that kind of mottled look on the leaf like that in general, generally through the whole plant like that, that's likely what that is. Spider mites typically only attack stressed plants in some way. You could over-fertilize, under-fertilize, bring them in the house in too little light. All kinds of scenarios. Don't know why this particular verbena, it's on a slope right here and it's a bit dry, so maybe that had some impact on it, but it allowed this insect to be able to, or this mite to be able to attack this plant and do this kind of damage to it. So that's another scenario. Well, another thing is it could be the plant is just in the wrong place. You could have a plant in too much shade, so it's stretching, it's stretching out, and the color is off a bit just because it's not getting enough sunlight to actually photosynthesize properly. The other potential thing you could have is some sort of herbicide burn or some sort of herbicide damage. So if you have a lawn area and you have a lawn service come and treat your turf area, and you have shrubs or trees, or ground covers or whatever close by, some of those herbicides that they use out there, some weed killers, weed preventers, those kinds of things could have a negative impact on plants that are close by that. I only mentioned spider mites out in the front garden, but of course you could have aphids and mealybugs and scale insects and all kinds of things causing discoloration in the leaves on your plant. So an investigation, under the leaf to figure out if it's some sort of insect related thing will help you narrow it down pretty quickly. On the herbicide drift, we did a video earlier this year. Our neighbor back here was spraying some Roundup or something over here, some sort of herbicide. And very quickly, our bignonia vine browned, from that. It didn't really go through a yellow phase. It just all of a sudden got crispy and leaves dropped off of it. It has come back out from that. We also had some damage on this Alyssium. We cut part of it out, but that was another, again, this kind of stuff happens, and you, as part of your investigation into what's going on with your plant, do consider that there's a possibility that you, a neighbor, a service you've hired, something like that, could have accidentally oversprayed something or sprayed on a breezy day. Some of these chemicals sit down really quickly, right out of the sprayer. You sit down really quickly on what you're trying to apply them on, and some of the others just stay up in the air a bit, and on a breezy day can end up on your plants. Beyond insects, of course, it can be disease related as well. You can have bacterial issues, fungal issues that attack the plant. Sometimes it will just spot them and off color them. Other times it can create some yellowing in the leaf. I don't worry about it too much on these big leaf hydrangeas. It's fairly normal behavior. We'll clean the leaves out from under it, after it loses them in the fall. But again, so this yellowing can be a lot of different things. When we get two sentences on why is it yellowing, you can already see here, there's a lot of reasons things can yellow. But I kind of want to get to the main group that's probably the hardest to diagnose, because I think these insect things you'll be able to figure out. I think these disease things you'll be able to figure out. I think you'll know if you've newly planted it and it's losing some leaves, or the plant's in full flower and it's losing some leaves, that kind of thing. You'll be able to figure those kinds of underwatering newly planted, stress-related 100-degree days, disease and insect things. I think the next group is where people really struggle to figure out what's going wrong. This is where this can be confusing, is that sometimes the yellowing is right up in the new growth. There's no disease there, there's no clear insect-related issue. You just can't, this can all look the same, but be a lot of different types of things. And I came to a gardenia for a reason, because gardenias are notorious for showing up with nutrient deficiency issues. So if you're seeing a leaf on something and you have that, here's a dark green leaf, but if you're seeing the veins on this leaf and seeing that yellow in the middle there, we know that is some sort of nutrient deficiency. Well, then you immediately go, well, what nutrient is it? Because I could just throw that nutrient at it, right? Like if, let's say it's an iron deficiency or something like that. But that doesn't always work, to fix the problem. A lot of times the nutrient deficiency is showing up for various reasons. The roots, something most frequently has happened to the roots of that plant that are not allowing it to process nutrients properly. Okay, so as an example of this, if tomato plants are tropical plants, if you put tomato plants out while it's 34 or 35, 36 degrees, that's not cold enough to kill them, but they can't process nutrients properly, and you get this purple foliage that shows up on them in the spring if you put your tomato plants out way too early, and it stunts them radically. It's a nutrient deficiency caused by that plant doesn't know what the heck to do when it's 34 degrees outside or 35 degrees outside. Again, not cold enough to kill it, but it causes a coloration to show up in it that you can't figure out, and then it stunts them for a long time. People that waited 3 weeks longer to put their tomatoes out, their tomatoes just start growing. So you can have these nutrient deficiencies caused by various things, but it's usually root related in some way. So let's say I plant this gardenia and I damage those roots on it. I cut those roots, I get it put into the ground, and then somebody told me, and I got this in a consultation the other day, water it every day. Okay, but then they didn't say, but if it rains that day, don't water. Okay, they just said water it every day because that's what you should do. And then you start to get yellowing showing up in that plant. That is some sort of root related issue that's being caused by overwatering potentially, that is not allowing those plant roots to work properly to bring nutrients up into the top of the plant. So you get this off coloring on it. The other thing is, and I did a video, and I think it's one of the more important videos I ever did on the channel, which is why is pH so important? So getting your pH tested initially when you move onto your property should tell you what type of plants that can grow most easily in your garden. Okay, so the pH scale is a 1 to 14 scale with 7 we call 7 neutral. Everything under 7 is acid soils or acidic soils. The lower that number is, the more acid the soils are. Most of these leafy evergreen plants that we have in this garden, and azaleas, rhododendrons, blueberries, gardenias, camellias, like acid soils. So they prefer a pH somewhere probably in the range of 5 to some as low as 4.5 and some as much as 6.5. That's where they want that pH range. Okay, if the pH is over 7, that's alkaline soils, and in alkaline soils, iron is not readily available to your plant. So these dark, rich green colors that you see out in this garden, a lot of that is iron. It's helping that coloration in those leaves. It's a combination of several things, but iron is a big component for some of these acid-loving plants. So if your pH is over 7, your plants are going to have more. The higher it goes above 7, the harder it is for that plant to get iron up into it. So you can get a discoloration from a nutrient deficiency that way. Okay, but it's all the same. It's all nutrient deficiency, right? It doesn't matter if I overwatered it and damaged the roots. It's going to show up as a nutrient deficiency. If my pH is off and I'm trying to grow plants that don't like that pH, or I'm not doing anything to change the pH of the soil, I would lime it to raise the pH. I would add sulfur maybe to lower the pH. If I'm not changing those soil conditions, that plant just can't process it. So it's a nutrient deficiency. Happens to be an iron deficiency. Throwing iron at it's not going to really change it all that much because the plant is, the soil is still, the pH is still too high. If an animal comes along, tunnels along the side of that plant somehow and does some damage to it and breaks those roots, and the yellowing shows up in the top of the plant, guess what? It's still a nutrient deficiency. I don't know what nutrient is causing it necessarily, but a nutrient deficiency was caused from root damage and those roots not being able to bring the proper nutrients up into the top of this plant. You think about these leaves are solar panels, okay? They collect the sun's energy, they make sugars, and those sugars are taken down into the roots of that plant, and in an exchange with hopefully your soil's in good shape with beneficial fungi, beneficial bacteria that eat those sugars, okay, those things help bring nutrients to that plant when it needs them. So if it needs iron in the leaves to help this process, or phosphorus or potassium or calcium or boron or zinc or whatever it is, they help bring those nutrients to it. Well, if those roots are damaged in some way, that is the reason that it's got the nutrient deficiency. It can't get those nutrients up into the top of the plant. So again, this shows up in these yellowing leaves, and then you have to go through a list of what could it possibly be that's causing that nutrient deficiency, whatever that nutrient deficiency is. Again, I would definitely want to check if you've got general yellowing on plants throughout your landscape in the newest growth. First of all, I would definitely get a pH test done. I'm not necessarily going to get a full, you can get a full test done, but I worry then that you're going to then go down the road of, ooh, I'm a little low on phosphorus, so let me add phosphorus, and I'm a little low on this, so let me add that. I don't want you to do that necessarily because you can overdo things. You have to be careful with that. But knowing your pH is super important. If it comes back that you have very alkaline soil, that's going to explain a lot about the issues, probably an iron deficiency in your plants. So once you check that off the list, so now I know I got my pH test back and it's 6.1. So now I know that that's slightly acid. That shouldn't be an issue for this gardenia or azalea or camellia or whatever plant we're looking at that's yellowing. So what could the next thing be? Am I overwatering it? You know, underwatering, again, you're going to lose that old foliage. The plant's going to wilt. It's going to probably give you some signs that you're underwatering it, and you can recover from underwatering, okay? You just start watering, right? And the plants can typically recover from that unless you've gone, obviously you can go too far underwatering, but overwatering, a lot of times you can't recover from it because you've damaged the roots, you've rotted the roots in some way. So watering needs to be done by checking to see if you need water, and not because it's Tuesday and that's the day my irrigation system comes on. You really do need to find the pattern in your area that makes sense, and then adjust. It's raining as we're having this conversation right now. And then adjust to conditions that are going on, temperature, humidity, soil moisture, all those kinds of things. And then get the watering situation straight. If you feel like you're doing okay on watering, you're not overwatering it, you feel like the pH is fine, then see if you've got any animals tunneling around it, potentially. See if there was any changes to the space recently. You know, you took out another plant over here, and now the soil's really quite a bit hotter. Maybe you brought in a new load of mulch and it was August and mulch was really, really hot. You know, that could potentially do some root damage to it. One possibility that I see on there's a few plants that will do this one, and this is the one that can be really confusing. When plants just kind of lay over a bit with this new growth up at the top, I think anyone that looks at that is going to think it's underwater, that it's dry, that it's telling me that it's actually dry. Even if you're overwatering, it could actually be dry. I mean, think about this for a minute. If I did enough damage to the roots on that plant, okay, then how would it actually get water up into the top of it? So we can actually get wilting from overwatering too. That's the worst kind of wilting. That probably means the plant has root rot, and you're in significant trouble if you see this particular scenario of it wilting while wet. Wilting while wet is usually we've gone too far, and it's unlikely to recover a lot of times from that. Not impossible, but that's what I'll say is make sure that when you see wilting on a plant, that you still go, maybe I should reach down there and see if it's actually wet. Use a finger, pull back some soil, use a moisture meter, whatever you want to do. A moisture meter may help you. If you're really confused about watering, getting an inexpensive moisture meter from Amazon and using that may be super helpful in the beginning on figuring those things out. So plants can show wilting while wet, because the roots are just so damaged that they can't actually bring water up into the top of it. But again, usually that's to the point of root rot where the plant, you may end up losing that particular plant. Once I got down that checklist, you know, where there was really no changes made around the plant, my watering practices seem okay. The plant was fine for 2 years, and then as all of a sudden started showing up in this newest foliage at the top, you know, with some yellowing like that. If I know my pH is right for that particular plant, and I highly recommend, if you get a pH test and your pH is 7.5, you should probably be thinking about plants, you know, for alkaline soils. If it's 6.5 or lower, then plants for acid, you know, for acid soils. You know, once you've gone through this checklist, I mean, I'm not overwatering it. I haven't done any root damage. Nothing was, you know, you could dig something over here and do root damage to it. You know, there's a lot of things like that. That's when I'm probably going to chase maybe down the rabbit hole of an actual soil test and look and see if I'm missing any particular nutrient altogether. Normally iron is available. It just gets locked up if my pH is too high. But I may go down that rabbit hole at that point of, am I missing something entirely in the garden that is making it nutrient deficient in some way? And then I would add that at that point. That's kind of the last thing I'm going to do, because again, you just can't take something out. If I come out, you know, nitrogen is like this in the soil. It's a day-to-day thing. We had a thunderstorm last night. You know, nitrogen literally, you know, can come down in rain. And so nitrogen changes, but things like phosphorus are pretty stable in the soil once they're there. And if you have whatever amount you have, when you add some, it will stay there and stay stable for a long time. You just don't want to go too far with it. So that's my concern. And then the other thing is general fertilizing. A lot of people are going to try to attack something like that with fertilizer, just assuming there's something in that fertilizer that's going to fix that problem. But again, how is that plant supposed to adjust if it's had some sort of root-related transplanting, overwatering, whatever it is? Generally, a straight fertilizer is just not going to fix it. I would then, at that point, if you can't identify it from the things I've gone through here, it's probably, again, time to get a soil test, figure out if there's something completely missing. Am I just missing potassium? Am I missing calcium? Am I missing magnesium? And then that thing could be added individually. Beyond that, we just fertilize once a year. I mean, the main things here, if you're looking at the plants in this garden, the vast majority of them are very healthy. I showed you a verbena that has some spider mites out there, and I've shown you a hydrangea that's got some leaf spot on it. But I actually have struggled to find any off-colored leaf in the new growth out here to show you what I'm actually talking about here, because we just don't have a lot of those issues. I'm not fertilizing very much. I'm only fertilizing once a year. The main fertilizer my plants are getting is this mulch. So I've got wood chips in the paths and hardwood mulch in the beds, and that's 90% of what I'm feeding these plants with. And we're trying to keep it evenly moist out here, but not wet. If you accomplish those things for the most part, and we do have the plants planted a little closer together, so some of the yellowing I see on plants, on foundation plantings especially, people plant the plants 3 or 4 feet apart, which is what the tag said. And then they put black mulch or some really dark mulch in the bed, and that sunlight can really work on those roots and damage those roots, and can create some yellowing up in the top of those plants and keep them off colored as well. So everything's planted tight in here. It's another strategy we're using. This plant is protecting this plant. Now we do have to cut things away occasionally from one another, and we'll have to make some changes in here because something will get more aggressive in time. But the initial planting of all of this is close enough together that this thing is protecting this thing, which is protecting this thing, and that's keeping them overall healthy. So that's the goal at the end of the day is to create an environment with healthy soil, because the soil is what's going to take care of these things. If you go out and plant a shrub in your lawn, or a tree in your lawn, you're probably going to go down a road of trying to figure out why the thing is burning more during the summertime, why it's off color, why it's losing leaves in midsummer, you know, all kinds of things that happen in that scenario. So if you're going in with a bed and you're planting new things, I highly recommend to make the bed big. Put your tree in the middle of it or wherever you want it in the bed, or break the bed up into thirds and put the tree on 1/3 and some other medium-sized shrub on another third, and then plant things around it. And those things working together will typically keep the plants in just overall better shape. But again, we've gotten this question a million times, why are my leaves yellow? And now you can see why there's a lot of reasons why your plants can be yellow. Generally speaking though, the vast majority of plants that I've seen killed in my time in this business, including the ones I killed, which I've killed more plants than probably most people watching this today, because I had a nursery for 23 years. I killed overwatering. I killed by loving them to death. I killed by seeing something on it and then going into some sort of panic around that, throwing fertilizer at it, pruning it, giving it way too much attention and not allowing it to kind of recover on its own, because sometimes that's the best case scenario, is just to leave it be. But follow those steps. You know, once you see something off color, I don't worry about it so much in the bottom. But if it's up in the top, just kind of follow those steps. You know, just just kind of analyze what's going on around that plant, and see if any of the things that I just said are clues that will help you figure out why that yellowing is occurring in that new growth. Thanks for watching.